If you have your Bibles this day, take it and turn to John chapter 8. We're looking at the I am statements of Jesus. When he was on earth, he made, as recorded in the Gospel of John, he made at least 7 direct statements about who he was, and he said, I am. Each time that represented the fact that he was something unique. He wasn't your normal prophet. He wasn't your normal rabbi. He was unique. By saying I am, he identifies with Jehovah, Yahweh, God. And in each of the statements that he makes, it tells us something about Jesus and his ministry and why he's here and his person, and the fact that he is the one who explains the Father, according to John 1:18. He is the one that tells us and reveals to us who the Godhead is. That means that each of these statements really take us right back to the understanding of God himself. And so this statement in chapter 8, verse 12 is the second statement. We looked yesterday at I am the bread of life. Jesus is the one that brings full sustenance to us. He satisfies the great longing of our spiritual lives. But in 8:12, he now is the light of the world. Jesus said, again spoke to them, saying, I am the light of the world. He who follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. Jesus made this statement at the Feast of Tabernacles, or Feast of Booths. This was one of the big feasts of the Jews, and it was one that most of the men came to, and they were called to come to it. Most of them did, and they would come and celebrate a special time. They were celebrating the time that the Lord brought them through the wilderness and they lived in tents, they lived in booths, and so when they came to the festival or the Feast of Tabernacles, they would build for themselves little huts out of sticks and different things, live in those huts for a while, remembering what God had brought them through, bringing them out of bondage of Egypt, and how they had lived once upon a time in tents in the wilderness. But during that time, as they were traveling through the wilderness, the Lord led them by day and by night with his glory, often called by the Jews the Shekinah glory. During the day, he would lead them by a cloud. That cloud would hang over top of the tabernacle. If the Lord wanted them to stay put, it would stay put. If the Lord wanted them to move forward to someplace else, then the cloud would lead them forward. At night, they couldn't see the cloud, so there was a fire that could lead them. If the Lord wanted them to go out at night, then he would lead them by this fire. If he wanted them to stay put, the fire was over the tabernacle. At the Feast of Booths, there was this giant menorah that was in the court of women. And this menorah would be lit all the time, and it was to symbolize the Shekinah glory that the people of Israel had experienced back in the wilderness. And so when the first century Jews looked at this light, this menorah in the tabernacle, they would be reminiscent of a time when the Lord's very presence led them on throughout the wilderness times. Now, Jesus is using that particular statement or that particular symbolism to say at this point in time, I am the light of the world. There's that menorah, and at one time the Lord led us through the wilderness by a fire or by a cloud, but I now am here. I am on earth, and I am the light of the world. And if you walk in me, you'll not walk in darkness. That would be the symbolism of that. We want to go back to John chapter 1 for just a moment. This light metaphor is not unique to chapter 8. We can find it back in chapter 1 and chapter 3. Chapter 1, verse 4, it says, in him was life, and the life was the light of men, and the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overtake it. So Jesus here now is the life, and he is the light of men. And that light shines in the darkness, just like the fire in the tabernacle, over top the tabernacle, back in ancient times, gave a light. So Jesus is the light that shines in the darkness. So the darkness could not overtake it. That is, the darkness could not either overwhelm it, or this word can sometimes be translated comprehend. The darkness did not comprehend that. And that would fit well with chapter 3, verse 19 to 21. Jesus here, after telling us how we can be saved, John 3:16, says, this is the judgment, verse 19, that the light has come into the world, that's Christ, and men love the darkness rather than the light, for their deeds were evil. For everyone who does evil hates the light, does not come to the light, lest his deeds be exposed. But he who practices the truth comes to the light, so that his deeds may be manifest as having been done by God. Why is it that people don't come to the light of Christ? Because they love their darkness. They love the sin that they live in. They don't come to Christ primarily because they love their sin. But for those who come to the light, they see the truth. Their deeds are exposed. Their lives are exposed. The truth is exposed. And they then would come to the Lord as they see the truth. That Jesus then is the light of the world that exposes ourselves, shows us what we really are, that the light of the world that shows us our need for Christ, the light of the world that shows the ugliness of sin, and the light of the world that leads us to God. Jesus is the light of the world.